Gold Rush. Whitewater Dustin Hurt incurred a devastating injury during the Season 8 premiere of Gold Rush, Whitewater last week. He thought he broke something in his hand while working on the pulley system for his crew's Deuce sluice. This is why the mine boss was MIA at the start of the May 2 episode. He ventured 30 miles from Nugget Creek to Haines, Alaska to get a prognosis on his hand, which caused excruciating pain. Meanwhile, operations came to a halt until he got back. Carlos Miner questioned how long they'd be down for. Hurt needed the season to pay off amid mounting debt from the cost of his claims. The group wanted to get as much work as possible done while Hurt was away. They went to check on their 250-pound Deuce sluice, engineered by brothers Wes and Paul Richardson out of parts from 3 other dredges. It was found dangerously close to the water, inches from possibly getting taken by the angry current below. The skyline anchors they installed 550 feet above weren't holding due to the weight of the dredge. A plan was made to find solid rock and install another set of anchors to act as a backup. Elsewhere, Hurt received devastating news. He had a broken finger and a ruptured tendon pulley. A choice had to be made. Go in for surgery as recommended by the doctor, which meant the end of the season, or do possible irrefutable damage to his hand and continue on. It's an easy choice for me. I'll give up a finger for that, he declared. Although Hurt would be on light duty and wouldn't do any diving, he leaned on the others who would have to go into full rotation in order to pick up the slack. When it came to their skyline issue, Hurt's idea was to crank the skyline so tight that the primary anchors blew out the unstable rock and transferred the load to James Ham's secure backup anchor bolts. This would allow them to add the tension and raise dredge clear of the water. They ran into issues with the anchor bolts not coming out, but through a dangerous process were eventually able to remove them. The fixing by breaking plan ultimately worked, meaning they could start diving for gold at the wall site. Up first were Miner and Paul. After 2 hours, the Deuce sluices experienced problems due to the rushing waters, affecting the dredge's filter basket intake restricted flow, superheating the hot water supply into the deadly steam. Luckily, the water valve opened up to release the boiling steam before reaching the divers. Material was moved, but gold wasn't found. The process was also impeded by foot valves getting stuck with sticks. One of those intake valves actually snapped off by the Whitewater. Without any replacement at the moment, they had to reduce effort by only using 1 diver. Morale was falling as Ham went into the water hoping to turn things around. He followed the bedrock wall and dredged out material to get down to its deepest point. Ham fought the fierce current dredging down to the bedrock. It was a real struggle. Hurt called it a day, but not before uncovering Ham found a small nugget. Proof they were in fact in the right spot. The Alaskan wilderness had always been Dustin's cathedral of chaos. The canyons howled, the water roared, and the wind carved through the valley with a ferocity that could tear through bone. Every sound, every ripple of that cold, glacial torrent was familiar, a living heartbeat of danger and reward that had defined him for years. But that morning, the river felt strange. The air was too still, too heavy, as if the land itself sensed something coming. A low mist rolled through the trees and gathered above the narrow channel of Whitewater where the crew had spent weeks cutting, hauling, dredging, and praying. The smell of diesel and wet silt hung thick in the dawn. Dustin stood at the edge of the canyon, hands buried in his gloves, eyes locked on the violent churn below. Beneath those icy depths lay the pay streak, the bedrock seam that could make or break the season. Every muscle in his body carried the ache of the last few weeks. Moving boulders the size of cars, battling suction hoses that twisted like snakes, and rebuilding rigs shattered by hidden rocks. But exhaustion was part of the deal. It always was. A foghorn echo broke the quiet. The sound of an approaching helicopter rattled over the ridge. Dustin's brow furrowed. Supply runs weren't due until the end of the week. The thump of rotors grew louder until it rolled over the tree line, scattering a flock of ravens from the spruce. The helicopter circled once before setting down on the gravel bar near camp. He started toward it, boots crunching over frost-hardened mud, water splashing from the shallows. Something in his gut shifted. The chopper door opened, and the pilot stepped out, followed by one of the production coordinators, face pale and tight. They moved quickly, avoiding the eyes of the crew. The world around seemed to muffle. The roar of the canyon dulled to a low hum. The coordinator handed him an envelope. The motion was stiff, almost mechanical. The paper trembled slightly in gloved hands, not from the cold, but from the weight of what it carried. Dustin took it. The paper was creased and damp with condensation. A hospital insignia marked the corner. The world slowed. The sound of the river fell away entirely. He tore it open and read. There were no words shouted, no sudden movement, no cinematic collapse. Only a man standing in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness, surrounded by mountains older than memory, staring down at a few lines of text that cracked the bedrock beneath his season and his soul. A heart attack. His father, Dakota Fred Hurt, the man who had taught him everything about gold, water, and will, was gone. The mountains around him blurred. The horizon wavered. For a moment he forgot how to breathe. The river below, that relentless beast they had fought for years together, seemed to roar in triumph and grief all at once. Dustin lowered the paper. His gloves were shaking. He looked up toward the mountains, the same peaks his father had gazed at 1,000 times before, chasing the promise of fortune and freedom. The mist swallowed him. The next hours bled into each other. The crew worked quietly, each man moving with a reverence that felt like mourning. The camp generator sputtered softly, and the sluice box sat idle. No one dared disturb the silence. Dustin moved through the motions of leadership out of instinct, checking hoses, flipping breakers, marking gravel cuts, but his mind wasn't there. It was somewhere far away, replaying old images of his father, the stubborn grin, the gravelly laugh, the fire in his eyes when a pan glittered under the sun. They had fought, argued, drifted apart, and found each other again through the same river that had nearly killed them both more than once. Their bond had always been built from rock and current, forged through near disaster and mutual obsession. Fred was more than a mentor. He was the mountain itself, immovable, unrelenting, always looming behind every decision Dustin ever made. Now the mountain was Gotha thought, settled like silt, heavy and impossible to wash away. By evening, the storm rolled in. Rain came in icy sheets, pounding the tin roofs of the dredge cabin. Dustin sat inside, staring at the old maps pinned to the wall, the ones his father had sketched seasons ago. Arrows and circles marked hidden channels, bedrock shelves, and gold-rich pockets along McKinley Creek. The handwriting was unmistakable, blocky, sharp, confident. He reached out, fingers tracing one of the circles near the top of the map. Old Glory Hole, Fred had called it. A place so dangerous that even he had hesitated to dive there again. Dustin could almost hear the old man's warning, the current too strong, the boulders too unstable. And yet, it was the last target on their list before the season's end. The loss carved something new inside him, a hollow, jagged determination. His father's legacy wasn't in the gold. It was in the fight. In the way he faced impossible odds with a grin and a curse. To walk away now would betray everything Fred had stood for. The rain intensified, hammering the roof until it sounded like gunfire. The camp lights flickered. The river rose, surging with fresh runoff. Dustin stood, grabbed his coat, and stepped outside. The storm slapped him across the face, cold and wild. He walked to the river's edge where the dredge floated in the current, tethered by steel cables that strained against the pole. Lightning flashed, illuminating the canyon walls in ghostly blue light. River roared like it knew what he had lost. He watched it for a long time, long enough for the cold to seep through his gloves and numb his skin. When he finally turned back toward camp, something inside him had hardened. The next day dawned clear but bitter. Ice fringed the river's edge, steam rising where the sun hit water. Dustin rose before the others, already suited up in his dive gear. The air smelled of metal and frost. The crew emerged slowly from their tents, faces drawn. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. They moved with methodical focus, checking the compressor, coiling the air hose, loading the dredge's sluice with mats. Every movement was steady, deliberate. It wasn't defiance, it was ritual. He descended into the water before sunrise, vanishing beneath the surface below. The world turned to cold chaos. Visibility was low, the current punishing. Rocks shifted with the weight of the water, grinding against each other in deep, echoing groans. He moved with the rhythm of memory, his father's teachings guiding every touch of his hand, every decision. Never fight the river head-on. Feel its pull. Let it show you the path.